Do you want to know the best way to develop an athlete, not just in a 6-week window or 3-week window, but over the course of 6 years? This is the blueprint that we use and that I've created over the course of a little bit over a decade of training youth and high school athletes. And this is something that I utilize in athletes across the board, whether they're 6 years old, 16 years old, or 60 years old. We still use this hierarchy or this base of development. And so the number one thing that I need to develop with an athlete when it comes to developing training for performance, this goes for any sport across the board, is I need a base level of coordination, your motor skills, and I need a base level of work capacity. I need you to not get tired in the first 3 minutes. I need to be able to have those two things to be able to broaden your horizon and teach you a wider array of movements and movement skills to also then further develop strength. And so I also need you to not get tired after 1 or 2 sets. We're not gonna be able to get much done in our time that we spend together. And so we need to make sure we understand how to manage fatigue, and we have a good bit of muscular, aerobic, and cardiovascular endurance. So once we get through this stage, and we have a strong base at this level, this is the foundation of our pyramid or our hierarchy. You know, always talk about training and developing an athlete is like developing or building a building. If I don't have a really strong base, a really strong foundation, those walls are gonna fall or collapse at some point. I've gotta go back and rebuild that foundation. This is still gonna happen as we broaden our horizons. We're gonna expand on the building. But for us, we do like to start and make sure that we have a strong base of coordination and a strong base of work capacity. Our next tier is as we climb up that hierarchy is focusing on what's called mobility and stability. You also see mobility sometimes substituted with flexibility. Do I have full range of motion of my joint? Can my elbow bend and extend this the way it's supposed to? Can my shoulder move through a full range without having to compensate through different parts of the body? If I can't reach my arm overhead without extending my thoracic and my rib cage here, my thoracic spine and my rib cage, I'm gonna run into shoulder problems at some point, especially if I'm an overhead athlete or my task for performance does require me to go overhead. And so am I robbing Peter to pay Paul? We're trying to make sure we set a good base here. And then once we have that full range of motion, now can I actually stabilize or produce some sort of stability and maintain balance through that range of motion? Same thing goes with the ankles, the hips, the knees, all the way through the body. We're trying to build up and ensure that we have at least adequate and really more than adequate flexibility and mobility, and then stability within those ranges. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're playing quarter field sports, you're not 100% sure what positions you might end up in. And so this is the next tier up our hierarchy for when we're looking to develop athletes, especially in that long term, and really even in the short term. We want to make sure we're able to check this box well. As we're able to check this next box of mobility and stability, we now started getting stronger in those ranges of motion. And so we use this by first implementing our base 6 foundational movements. These are 6 foundational movement patterns that you'll see that weren't just created by me. I didn't actually create these, I just implement these. But there's a lot of professionals across the board, and you'll notice that if you watch people moving their day to day, these are movements we should be able to do. One, we're talking a squat. Most people get terrified of a squat. If you actually go back to thousands of years ago, we went to the bathroom sitting all the way into the ground. You might not be able to see me on screen much anymore, but hips get all the way below the knees, and I'm able to stabilize there because that's how we used to go to the bathroom. Can I even sit down to a chair without having to fall backwards? You know, when we start talking our 60, 70, 80-year-old athletes, they start to sit down, they fall back in the chair. Well, if I can't squat down to a chair, I'm not gonna last very long and my body's gonna start to give up on me sooner than later. Number 2, so number 1 squat. Number 2 is a hinge. Can I hinge at my hips, keeping my spine nice and neutral, and pick something up off the ground? This is not only good to be able to do, this is also one of the best things to develop your explosive ability. The stronger my posterior chain is, the backside, or the muscles on the backside of the body, generally more force and power I can create to jump higher, run faster, etc. And so these are 2 of the biggest movements that we really like to emphasize in our athletes, especially early on, to make sure they understand, hey, this is how we do this well. We start with dumbbells and kettlebells first. From there, once you've surpassed our baseline standards to move up to a barbell, we force you to go through the eccentric or the down range very, very slow to make sure that we're building and maintaining a strong pattern, movement pattern first, before you start loading the weight. Because once you start loading the weight, we can have some fun, but we are running a high risk of injury if you don't do that well. Third foundational movement pattern is, can I press? We're talking push up, we're talking an overhead press, can I press something overhead, and anything in between, dips. And then 4th would be a pull, so same thing, can I pull something to me? Can I pull myself up? Can I pull something up to my face if I'm picking it up from the ground? Number 5 would be, can I do a lunge or a step up? Something where I have to balance on one leg and produce strength and force in that unilateral position, because a lot of sport happens on one leg. Especially on field and sport courts, anytime that you're running, we're typically on 1 foot or one leg at a time. So we need to be able to be strong on one leg throughout all the ranges or throughout our course of our athletic career. And so that's another strong foundational movement pattern. And then last but not least is carrying, whether we're doing a farmer's carry, some sort of sandbag or anterior carry with a plate, an overhead carry. We want to be able to keep our rib cage and our pelvis stable here, and we want to keep them connected. If I can't maintain posture and I get this lordosis here in my lower back, or my hips are shooting back and I'm extending through my rib cage, very quickly I'm going to start experiencing lower back pain, most likely. Vice versa, if I end up in this opposite posture all the time, I'm either going to have shoulder and neck pain, or you're going to still see that trickle down in the hips and the lower back. And so can my pelvis stabilize and move together? And so carrying is one of the best ways to build up core strength. What I teach our athletes is the core is the hips through the shoulders. Your abs are the center or the core of your core, but that's not your core. Your core is that core of the body, the core of the limbs. And so can I stabilize my torso and my pelvis to be able to move together so I can optimally produce force, I can run, I can jump, I can do all those fun things we want to do, but I also really decrease my risk of injury. Next up, once we can check that box and we've built a great foundation of strength, then we do start getting into tempo and speed control of those movements and maybe some other movements that are very similar to these 6 foundational movement patterns. And so in this, we're working on one, we make them go a lot slower in this. So there's already a piece of that built in, but then can I start to speed that movement up and I still maintain my full range of motion, coordination? Can I still maintain my mobility and stability? Can I still be strong with a faster speed? Because if I can, now I'm starting to improve my power output. You see a lot of people that are really strong, but they're not very powerful. They're not very explosive. And so if I can maintain all of these things and I can start working on moving faster at it, that's where I'm going to see my power go up. If my power goes up, now I'm going to start running faster. I'm going to start jumping higher. I'm going to be able to move laterally better. You're going to see a lot of those things that we're really training for, that we want to spend most of our time here. We start to see those things really start to come to fruition on the court, on the field, or whatever sport we're playing. Well, we start by being able to control it through this base here. And once I can do that, now if I can speed that up, if I can slow it down, if I can pause at certain portions of the movement and have that tempo control throughout, then I'm going to be able to see a lot higher ability into our last tier here, which is skill performance. And so if your athlete is practicing in their sport regularly, this is already going to be adhered to or played in quite a bit. People want to talk about sport-specific training. Most of the time that happens on the field or on the court. There's very few things that we want to do or that we will do in the gym that's going to mimic sport-specific movements. Good instances, if I'm trying to mimic a golfer's swing, well, that's such a finite detail and such a fine-tuned movement with a specific piece of equipment. So if I start trying to do med ball throws, I'm trying to mimic too much of what they do there, I could hinder or throw off what's going on in their swing itself by forcing them to do too much with the med ball. Now, we will still do rotational med ball throws, and we'll do things where they may get in their stance. They feel what it's like to generate power from there, but I'm not trying to do too much mimicking of what's going on with their club head, things of that nature. Same thing with a volleyball player. If I'm going up and I'm working on trying to hit a ball harder, I want you to develop overhead strength, overhead stability, and I want you to be able to do that slow, fast, whatever tempo the program requires at the time of the year. And then if you're going out and practicing that on the court, that's where you're going to really see that occur and get better. You got to practice the skills of the sport. But if we want to see that happen, we got to work through this pyramid, this hierarchy. And once you've really climbed your way up here, the goal then would be that we maintain this as best possible in season. We work through all these phases. But when you get done with your season, then we come out and we start expanding that pyramid to then hopefully take you even higher. And so that's how we look to shape and develop an athletic career. For us, we always talk about we're not sport coaches. We're not going to coach you or develop your skills in your sport specifically, but we're developing you to be a stronger, faster, more resilient athlete that can handle the demands of your sport better, and you can do the things better to help you see the success that you desire. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Please feel free to reach out and let me know what you guys thought and how useful this was to you guys in trying to develop your athletes.